Our discussion will from 7:30 to 8:30. Problem here. Today we have. Sorry, we have Dr. Cunlin Wang will be the speaker. 今天我们主要会是王存林博士会跟我们先做个报告。And he is the Vice President, Safety and Pharmacovigilance in the company or the Percentage Group in Maryland. 那王博士他是这边在马里兰州的一个公司的这个安全方面的部门的副总裁。After his presentation, we have 2-3 panelists. Next one is Wang Henbing医师 Dr. Wang Henbing. 那等王博士报告讲完以后，就是接下来会有2-3位我们这个参加讨论的专家。第一位就是王henbing医师，他是我们这附近的一个医生，我想大家不陌生。Dr. Wang is a doctor here in the Ukiah Valley Medical Center. And then we have also Helen here. I think is a nurse practitioner. 另外就是于和她是医护士。And I don't know whether Donna will join us or not. 另外有一位是我们这里的也是一个护士。So and this we have also live stream on YouTube. If you prefer YouTube, and go on YouTube. 这个我们这个在 YouTube 上面也有直播，所以如果希望 YouTube 的话，你可以到 YouTube 去。Okay, so much for that, and Cunlin, you can start now. You can just.
All right, let me share my screen then. Okay, thank you. Can you all see my screen?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Dr. Master Yun, for organizing this panel. And because Ming already gave a pretty comprehensive overview of COVID-19 last weekend. So I will just briefly update the group on what has been the major new findings, new development in the last week or so, and then and go to other panel members for their input. And first, just want to start with disclaimer. So the presentation is based on public available information. The views, presentation, and the panel discussion personal doesn't represent any organization, government agency. So I encourage you to discuss with your health providers for your own healthcare decision. 首先呢，就是非常感谢永法师组织这个专家小组的讨论，因为那个李居士上周已经做了一个非常全面的一个 COVID-19 的一个报告，所以我这周主要是先给大家做一点最近这2天的新的发展这方面一个小的总结，然后我们就可以开始这个 panel discussion. I start from vaccine. And right now we already have 2 mRNA vaccine available in US and passed FDA EUA authorization, and 2 more vaccines are on the line, and one already been submitted for the EUA, another one's coming out pretty soon. So we'll have more detail for those candidates for the vaccines in the later slides. 首先就是说我们现在市场上现在就是说给大众使用的现在有2种 mRNA 的这个疫苗了，然后另外一个呢 Johnson & Johnson 的疫苗呢，这周也 递交了 FDA 的 EUA 的申请，然后另外一个那个 Novavax 这个蛋白基础的这个基于蛋白的这个COVID的疫苗呢，也会在最近的几个月，大概几个月时间啊，可能会 available， 所以我们会今天主要前面这3个疫苗做一个稍微详尽一点的概述。And before going to the individual vaccine, just want to set up the stage, right? So people who do not have background on the clinical development vaccine, generally, and for the clinical development vaccine and divided by phase. And the phase 1 is really the first time the vaccine candidate and being tested in a human. So generally start with a few number of healthy volunteers, less than 100. And the purpose of phase 1 study is really testing whether the vaccine, the toxicity of the vaccine, any serious toxicity, preventing the vaccine candidate from developing further. If the phase 1 turned out to be safe, there's no significant safety concern. Move to the phase 2, that's where generally several hundred volunteers get tested. Again, the prime objective of phase 2 is look at the safety, but in the meantime, start looking at how the human body respond to the vaccine. For COVID, that's where people start looking at whether neutralized antibody has been generated. If so, at what level? If phase 2 and shows the vaccine safe and also shows promising and results with regard to the response, and then move to the phase 3. And generally, phase 3 is much larger scale and involving tens of thousands of volunteers, and also generally is required by using design as randomized, controlled, and double-blinded clinical study. And the reason for that, because that's the highest level of scientific evidence you can generate for any new drugs or vaccine candidate. That's also required by the regulatory agency. And I think that's what they did for Moderna and Pfizer vaccine. Their phase 3 trials involved 30 to 40,000 subjects. So primary objective phase 3 is really how the phase 2 neutralized antibody has been translated into protecting people from getting the disease. And plus, and phase 3, of course, objective is also further looking at the safety at the larger and population. And if the phase 3 and turn out to be a really good and vaccine and shows to be safe and efficacious, and also FDA determine the benefit outweigh the risk for the vaccine, then they'll approve the vaccine and then move to the phase 4. That's where the company and further evaluate the long-term toxicity, long-term safety and efficacy of the vaccine. So 首先呢，我这个 slide 先简单讲一下这个疫苗的临床试验、临床的发展大概是分几个阶段进行。第一个阶段就是 phase 1，这是这个疫苗呢从这个临床前第一次进到临床，是第一次这个疫苗呢在人体上做实验，所以一般都是非常小心的进行，一般都就几十个这个健康的实验者，然后这个1期的实验的主要目的就是看这个疫苗是不是安全，有什么非常重要的这个毒性。如果1期呢确实觉得这个实验是疫苗是安全的话，那么就是进入到2期。第2期呢一般大概就会有几百个这个志愿者然后参加。二期的主要目的呢，就是首先也当然是看安全性，然后第二期的是第二个这个目的就是也看这个人体这个疫苗的这个反应怎么样，尤其对这个 COVID 来讲呢，对新冠来讲就要看是不是这个疫苗诱发了这个 neutralized antibody 中和抗体。然后，如果第二期实验证明这个疫苗是安全的，然后又能够诱发这个足够剂量的、足够浓度的这个中和抗体的话，那这个疫苗就会进入到第3期实验。第3期实验一般就上万人的、几万人的这个志愿者参加。然后第3期实验一般设计都是要这个随机双盲这个对照的实验研究，这是从这个科学这个实验的角度来讲，这是最严格的，也是最严格的一种科学实验吧。然后这种实验3期实验呢，也是这个 Moderna 和 Pfizer 他们这个 COVID-19 的疫苗所做的这个3期的实验是这样做的。3期实验的最主要的目的就是看，2期里面证明了可以产生中和抗体，那么3期主要看这个疫苗是不是可以在产生中和抗体的基础上，可以保护这个受试者不受这个 COVID 的这个感染。然后当然3期呢也是在更大量人群的基础上来进一步的观察着安全性。那么3期实验如果证明结果确实好，这个疫苗安全而且确实有效的话，然后 FDA 会审批，然后在这个基础上呢决定，其实这个疫苗可以上市了，那么进入这个上市叫第4期。然后这时候呢 也是这个公司呢，就是在这个长期的这个追访这些接受疫苗的这个人群啊，来决定他们长期的这个安全性和毒性，长期的安全性和有效性。And also take a minute and also want to let people understand and how much scrutiny already built into the process for the vaccine development, and especially with regard to the safety before the vaccine become available to us. And start from IND application called investigational new drug application. So once a vaccine can be developed from preclinical before and get tested on human, the company have to submit a package including all the preclinical information, toxicology information, tested on animals, to demonstrating and the vaccine candidate is going to be safe, and all risk can be managed, and also has potential to benefit the human. And that's where FDA reviewed the entire IND application, determining whether whether that is the case. If so, FDA will give the green light, and then the company will submit the study protocol to the investigational sites, and generally are large universities like UCLA, UC Berkeley, etc. And then the site also have institutional review board, right? Their job is to protect the safety of the subject enrolled in the clinical trial. So they will look at the studies and determine whether it's going to be safe for the subject enrolled into the study. If no, they will decline. If yes, and move on. And then to the third step, and then study can get started running. And also for the larger major clinical trials, also have a drug safety monitoring board. Those are independent experts and hired by the company, and their job is really to periodically review all the safety efficacy data, determine whether and the benefits to outweigh the safety. If there's significant safety concerns, DSMB can recommend to shut off the study, and likewise, RB can also close the study if there's any safety concerns. And if there's no safety concerns, and also clinical results read out the vaccine is safe, efficacious, and then they will send to the FDA for BLA review. BLA stands for Biological Licensing Application. And that's a large package, including preclinical, clinical, manufacture, quality control, everything. Generally can be hundreds of thousands and pages long. It's a huge package. And for COVID, FDA also bring that application to advisory committee. That's independent committee, and including experts from outside agency, primarily from academia, and they will review and discuss the application in a very transparent manner. All for COVID-19, we see the advisory committee is a live broadcast on YouTube, all the major media. And towards the end, the advisory committee will make recommendation to the agency whether should approve this or not. FDA generally take that advice, but sometimes they don't. If FDA decide, okay, this vaccine is safe and efficacious, and then move on to the CDC, again, CDC, Center for Disease Control and Prevention, have their own advisory committee for immunization practice, ACIP, and they will review this vaccine, the package information again, and determine whether the vaccine is safe, efficacious. If so, they will add that into the national immunization program. And then at the state level, depend on the state also can have their expert panel to review the package and determine whether there's something they want to make available to their state resident. And for example, California for COVID, they have their own independent expert panel. Only when all these steps are passed with the green light, and then the vaccine become available. That's where we are now, of course, and the vaccine will be continued followed in the post-market for long-term toxicity. If there's any significant concern occurred, been identified, and then go back to FDA, FDA can withdraw the EUA approval and can withdraw the product from the market. 所以这个呢，我简单的讲一下，就是跟大家说一下，在这个疫苗的临床研究过程中间有多少这个步骤哈，这个保证这个疫苗的安全性。这个呢就是每个 step 我来简单说一下。第一步就是在疫苗进入人体试验之前，这个公司要向 FDA 递交一个新药试验的申请。这里面要总结所有他们在这个动物身上在临床之前做的所有的这个毒理方面的实验。 当然也要证明这个疫苗确实要有效的，把这个所有的信息递交去 FDA 要 review，只有 FDA 觉得这个疫苗可能是安全，会是安全的，而且可能会有这个临床的效果的话，才会批准这个要上临床试验。然后上临床试验呢，每个临床的这个医院，每个临床的这个医院呢，或者大学的这个大学呢，它也会有自己的 Institutional Review Board， 它这个是临床的伦理委员会，他们的职责主要就是保证这个参加这个实验的这些志愿者的安全。如果有什么安全性的问题的话，他们可以把这个实验就拒绝掉。然后当然，如果他们通过的话呢，这个实验就开始了。然后一般的大的临床实验，像3期的临床实验呢，同时会有这个独立的叫 Drug Safety Monitoring Board。他们的就是说白就是安全性的监督委员会，他们的职责呢，就是在他们要定期的这个审理安全性和有效性方面的数据，如果有什么比较重要的安全性的这个发现的话，他们也可以建议把这个实验关掉。然后整个这个，当然这个我刚才说了，这个 IRB 也可以把这个实验关，如果安全性 IRB 也可以这样做。如果整个这个实验顺利的进行下来的话，这个结果显示这个疫苗既是安全的也是有效的。这时候呢，这个公司呢把整个这个所有的这个信息，包括临床和临床之前，还有他们生产的指控所有的信息，做一个总的汇总，变成一个大的这个就是递交一个非常综合性的这个审批，这个叫那个 biological license， 就是生物安全上市审批，然后这是要递交的 FDA 会做一个非常综合的审理。然后在这个新冠这方面呢，因为这个有这个大家公众的关注性很高，所以 FDA 呢直接把这个新冠呢又带到了FDA 自己的这个顾问委员会上。这些顾问委员呢都是不是 FDA 的职员，都是各个大学或者各个其他研究机构里面的专家，他们会在这个非常透明公开的这种方式来讨论这个疫苗的情况，然后呢最后给 FDA 做一个推荐，是应该批还是不批。即便 FDA 批了这个疫苗以后呢，这个疫苗呢也会递交到 CDC 疾病控制中心去。疾病控制中心呢又有他自己的一个独立委员会，叫这个immunization 的这个顾问委员会。这是呢又是另外一批专家，他们主要是又要审批这个疫苗的安全性和有效性，来决定是把这个疫苗加入到这个全国的这个免疫计划中间去。然后在这个基础上呢，每个州呢又可以自己设立自己的这个安全性的这个专家委员会来审批，做一个决定，是不是这个疫苗是不是要在我们州做一个推广只有把所有的这些环节都通过了，都没有问题的情况下，这个疫苗呢才会真正的就是说递交到，就是真正的可以放开给老百姓来做这个注射。这是我们现在就是这个新冠疫苗的一个阶段。当然呢，我刚才说到了，这个疫苗即便上市以后开始注射了以后呢，它的长期的安全性和有效性仍然这个公司包括我们 CDC、FDA 也要负责监督。如果有任何这安全性的问题的话 ，FDA 会把这个它前面那个审批 UA 的这个审批能够随时可以取消掉。And the next question people generally have is, in generally vaccine development take about 5 to 10 years, and why this mRNA vaccine and takes such short time, generally 11 to 12 months, had any corner been shut and been cut. So here, this slide just want to highlight a couple of extraordinary efforts that have been taken and which typically are not available for routine vaccine development, and which has been really time resource saving. The number one is set up a trial and set up international multi-center, multi-country trial. And generally, this is very time-consuming and time-consuming space and step. But for COVID, and they took advantage of existing clinical trial network, and the U.S. federal government already set up for HIV, and for more than 2 decades, involving a lot of countries and international, and also involving a lot of major university research center in this country. And so that has been a huge time-saving step. The second is investment. And for routine vaccine development, generally, company will not invest on and scale up the manufacture and for mass production before they have the positive clinical trial results read out. but for COVID, and the company took the risk and started scale up the manufacture even before the control result become available. I think federal government also provide a financial incentive on that regard and contribute to that. And the third, of course, Mmr vaccine, and it's different from traditional vaccine, and generally it's faster and in producing in the large scale. And the last one is also for the review. FDA, CDC, and has really shortened their review timeline and put this as a priority. And the reason the review timeline got short is not because the FDA and CDC lowered their scientific standards for approval. It's more because they put everything on their hands down and put this COVID-19 application at the number one and top one priority. 这个 slide 呢，我想简单说一下，就是因为有的人就问了，一般疫苗发展研发要花5到10年的时间。那这个疫苗呢，大概就花了大概不到1年的时间，是不是有太省时间了？是不是中间有什么重要的这个步骤就给省掉了呢？所以这个地方我就想简单介绍一下，就是，这个我们新冠疫苗的研发呢，确实利用了有一些这个怎么说呢？有一些非常利用了现有的资源，或者有些其他非常 extraordinary 的这个努力吧。所以我们新冠的疫苗的跟其他新冠疫苗的研发跟其他普通疫苗有些不同的地方。第一点呢，就是它这个临床试验的这个开展，像一般呢。就要开展一个这个国际性的多中心的大型几万人的这个临床试验的话，需要花很多时间去准备。但这个新冠疫苗在这个研发的过程中间呢，利用了这个美国联邦政府已经这个已经 set up 已经建立的这个国际性的这个临床实验的这个综合网络吧，包括了许多国家，包括了这个美国的很多这个。最好的大学，他们这个网络原来最早建立是用来研究 HIV 的疫苗的，所以现在正好就用新冠的期间就用来检测了新冠的疫苗，这一步是省了很大的时间和资源的。第二步呢，就是这个投资，一般情况下呢，就是疫苗的公司呢，它不会大量投资这个生产线，然后呢把这个生产线扩得很大，直到呢。什么时候他才这样做？就是他这个3期临床实验结果出来非常好，他才开始投资，开始扩大他的生产线，因为这个是很花钱的一步哈。然后，但是呢，对新冠来讲呢，他就是 take 了这个怎么说呢？他就采取了相对比较这个从财政来讲比较危险的一步吧，就是还没有等到临床试验的结果出来，他就开始已经扩大他的生产线了。这也是主要省时间的一步。当然呢，美国联邦政府在这方面也对新冠就是研发这公司呢提供了一些这个财政这方面的这个有利的一些条件吧，也促使他们这个做这么一个决定。第3点呢，就是mRNA 疫苗它的生产和普通疫苗不一样，本身呢它就比较更快速一些，更有效率一些。第4点呢，就是 FDA 和 CDC 的这个审批过程是大大的缩短。这个不是因为 FDA 和 CDC 呢降低了他们这个科学的审批的标准，而是因为 FDA 和 CDC 呢把他们手头所有的活都放下，然后把这个新冠疫苗的这个审批呢作为他们的最重要的一个优先。I think everyone knows and how the Mmr vaccine works, so I probably can skip these slides. And so basically the main takeout from these slides is, and this vaccine only including a small piece of messenger RNA code and the coding the sequence, have the sequence coding for the spike protein. And then the messenger RNA wrapped up and protected by the lipid nanoparticle. 这个是就是说简单讲这个 mRNA 疫苗是怎么它的工作的原理是什么，这个大家都知道了，所以我就不用说了。主要一点我就想说一下，就是这个 mRNA 疫苗里面它只有一小段这个基因的序列，这个基因序列呢是这个编码这个病毒表面的一个 spike protein 的，然后这段小的基因序列呢因为 mRNA 在人体中间，在体外在人体中间或者在体外的环境下是非常不稳定的，所以它用那个纸质的这个颗粒把它保护起来，这就是这个新冠疫苗这个最主要的核心的组成部分。 And for the vaccine, this is for the efficacy. So this is a Pfizer vaccine. I think 2 points I want to highlight here. And number one, this vaccine is extremely efficacious. We know that's 95%, right, after 2 doses. You can see this is blue line indicating percentage of people get infected by COVID over time. The red line is people receive the vaccine. You can see the 2 lines are divided, indicating the vaccines work, and very early. So if you zoom in the first 21-day window, you can see the 2 lines actually divided or separated around day 12. What this indicating is the vaccine and start showing the protection in after first dose and maybe up to the 10 to 12 days after the first dose in vaccination. Indeed, in their analysis, they did show after dose 1 and before dose 2, the vaccine already offer 50% and reduction on the COVID infection. 这个是那个Pfizer 那个 mRNA 疫苗的这个有效性这方面的一个图。我们知道这个疫苗是非常有效的哈。打了2针以后，打了2针7天之后，它的有效保护率达到95%，效果非常好。另外想说一点就是，这个蓝色的线呢，表示的就是那些接受了这个安慰剂，他们这些病人感染这个新冠，随着时间感染新冠的这个比例逐渐增高，而接受了疫苗的这些人，你发现他们随着时间延长，他们感染新冠的比例并没有增高，而且这2组人群呢，大概在第1针之后，大概12天左右就开始分开了，这2条线就开始分开了，这说明就是打了第1针疫苗，大概10天左右，这个疫苗就开始产生了保护的作用。这是呢，当然这个图上面这个图是下面这个放大了，然后这个他们也做了一个分析，就是在打完第1针，在打第2针之前呢，这个疫苗已经提供大概50%的这个保护率了。And this is for the Moderna vaccine. Again, we see the same thing, and the 2 lines and separate before the second dose was given. Second dose given day 28 here, and the second, again, the vaccine is extremely efficacious in 94%. And also very important, I want to highlight here, in placebo group, there are 30 patients and experienced severe COVID infection, but in the vaccine group, 0. And so 这个呢是这个Moderna 的这个疫苗的这个有效性，就是2点啊，就是highlight，就是它也是一样，在这个在给第2针之前，第二剂疫苗打之前，这个疫苗已经开始出现了保护的作用，然后总体的保护是达到94%。另外一点就想提一点，就是在安慰剂组呢，有30例这个新冠的这个严重的新冠的病人，这些病人是需要住院呀，可能要住 ICU 加护病房这样的非常严重的病人。但是在这个疫苗组呢，1例这样的病人都没有。So here, just want to summarize efficacy for mRNA vaccine, and not only protect the disease, but also important in the severe disease. So basically, what that's saying is, even if if one of us falls into the 5% category and still develop the COVID after vaccination, develop the COVID infection, but it's not going to be the severe infection. And that's important because the reason this disease is important from public health standpoint because they can turn into severe infection and people hospitalized can die. If vaccine can prevent not only disease but also the severe infection, and that offers the potential to turn this disease into something, and we have much more experience such as a common cold. And second, and the study, large study, and 30 to 40,000 and volunteers, and offer representative sample of the U.S. population, including older age, and people also have the baseline comorbidities and high risk for the severe infection. And third, and we just demonstrating and actually vaccine offer the protection even 10 to 14 days after the first dose. 这个呢，做一个简单的总结，就是这个疫苗呢，这2个 mRNA 都是这样，它们不光可以预防这个 COVID 的这个怎么说呢，有症状的感染吧，同时呢，也可以这个预防这个严重疾病的发生。就是即便有的人非常不幸啊，就是落在那个5%的这个范围之内，他打了疫苗之后仍然得了有症状的感染了，但这个感染呢不会变成一个严重的感染。所以我们知道这个病之所以让大家恐惧的地方，就是它会变成严重的感染，住院甚至会死亡。但是疫苗确实可以预防 both。 防这2个都可以预防。然后第二呢，就是说这2个那个3期临床实验呢，都是大量的人群，他们包括的这个人群包括了老年人，包括了这些有这个基础疾病的，包括像这个糖尿病啊、高血压这些人呢，我们知道他们感染新冠以后得这个严重性感染的几率比较高，这些人呢这些人在这个临床实验都包括了。第3呢，就是这个从这个疫苗的这个有效性来讲呢，打了第1针之后，过了10到14天，这个疫苗就开始提供保护作用。And for safety, I don't need to go to the large and table here, large charts here, and here provide a summary. There's no anyway, in summary, there's no significant safety concerns and from clinical trial. This is based on a minimum 8 weeks of follow-up. Everyone at least have 8 weeks follow-up, and for people enrolled in clinical trial earlier, they have even longer follow-up. The reason 8 weeks was selected because based on our knowledge, understanding of vaccine, and generally safety concerns occurred hours, days, or few weeks after vaccination. 8 weeks is a long time enough window to look at a safety concern. And the common side effects, number 1 from a local is injection site pain, and generally occurs within hours and very rarely and severe. And most common systemic reactions, including fatigue, headache, muscle pain, and fever actually is less common, only 10 to 15% subject experience of fever, and also very rarely high fever, higher, for example, 39 degrees or higher. And also this both local and systemic reaction responsive to acetaminophen or ibuprofen. And as mentioned, and the younger subject actually turned out to be more reactions than older subject, and maybe because they have a stronger immune response and to the vaccine. And also compared to dose 1 and dose 2, and generally after dose 2, we see a little bit more frequent and side effects, and also a little bit more severe side effects after dose compared to dose 1. And also, in the clinical trial, identified a few cases of Bell's palsy, and there's 3 cases in vaccinated group, and compared to 1 case in placebo group in Moderna trial, and 4 to 0 in Pfizer trial. And 2 comments I want to make. Number 1, the difference between vaccinated and the placebo group here is too small to make any meaningful interpretation. Although numerically we see a little bit higher in number of Bell's palsy events from vaccinated group, but also important to understand, and in general population, the risk of developing Bell's palsy is 2 to 4 per 10,000 people. And here, both trials enrolled 30 to 40,000 people. So naturally, we're expecting maybe between 3 to 8 people will develop Bell's palsy. So vaccinated group actually fall into that expected range. The last one is anaphylactic reaction, and this is something observed after rollout of vaccine program into the post-market. And based on the current most recent information published from CDC, the risk for the anaphylactic reaction is 2 per 1 million dose for Moderna vaccine, and 11 per million dose for Pfizer vaccine. And just put that into the context, and that rate is much lower than other drugs that are well known for anaphylaxis, for example, penicillin, and anaphylactic reaction is 1 per 5,000 dose. But nevertheless, the current and the guideline from CDC's recommend observe the subject after receiving the dose at least for 15 minutes for people who have history allergic reactions to be longer. 所以呢，这张幻灯，我想把这个它们安全性现在这个2个疫苗的安全性的做一个汇总。首先就是说，他们临床试验呢没有发现非常重要的这个安全性方面的这个问题。当然，这个临床试验的这个追访时间呢是最低是8周。最后加入实验的这个志愿者呢，他也要随访至少8周，然后最早加入实验的随访时间就更长了。 之所以选8周呢，因为这个根据我们现在对其他疫苗的了解，疫苗一般的安全性问题，就在打了之后呢，一般都是几个小时、几天或者没有几周就出现了，所以8周呢是观察安全性一个比较长的一个窗口了，然后呢，现在呢就是说最常见的这个副反应，在这个打针的这个地方，主要就是疼痛，一般几个小时之内出现了，然后呢。很少会比较严重的疼痛，一般情况1到2天就都缓解了。然后那个全身性的反应呢，主要就是疲劳、头痛，然后有时候会有肌肉关节的痛。然后呢，这个发热呢，其实比较少见，大概只有10%到15%的病人会出现发热的症状，然后很少有出现这个高温的、这个高热的，超过39度这个样子的。然后一般这些这个局部或全身的症状呢，都可以通过服用一些这个怎么说这个降热的这种普通的药来做缓解，然后呢就是在这个实验中间，这人群之间做一个简单的比较吧，就是一般年轻的人。55岁以下的，他这个出现这个副反应的这个几率呢，或严重性稍微比老年人高一点，因为他们的这个免疫系统更强。另外呢，就是打完第2针以后出现这个副反应的几率和严重性稍微比第1针也要强，要高一点。然后呢，另外就是在这临床实验中呢，出现了这个面神经瘫痪，就叫 Bell's palsy。然后呢，在这 Moderna 这个实验里面呢，疫苗组出现了3例，对照组出现了1例。然后这 Pfizer trial 里面是4-0，然后呢，我首先有两点讲。第一点就是这2组之间的比较，疫苗组对照之间，他们这个虽然这个好像疫苗组数量高一点，但是呢，因为他们这个差别确实非常的小，所以现在还没有统计学的这个意义。第二呢，就是在这个普通的正常人群中间，就大众人群中间的这个面神经瘫痪的发病率是，一般是1万人中间有2到4例。然后他这个临床实验呢，包括了3到4万的这个志愿者，所以，就是说预期的这个，即便没有打疫苗的情况，预期的这个面神经瘫痪这个发病率呢，也在到3到8例之间，所以呢，这个疫苗组的这个面神经瘫痪的发病率是在这个预期的范围之内的。然后第3个呢，最后一点呢，就是这个严重性的这个 Anaphylactic 严重性的这个过敏反应吧，这是在这个上市以后才出现的。然后根据现在 CDC 统计的数据呢，在 Moderna 疫苗中间严重性的过敏反应是100万这个注射中间会出现2例大概，然后呢这个 Pfizer 的疫苗是100万注射中间会出现11例。这个100万注射什么概念哈？就是咱们现在这个 Mendocino County 大概9万人口吧，就是说9万人口，就是10个 Mendocino County 所有的人口全部的接种疫苗，可能才会出现1例这样的1到2例这样的 case，这样的这种严重过敏反应。然后呢，跟其他就是说其他有可能。就是说比较大家都知道的哈，可以产生这个严重过敏反应的药比较，这个比例实际上是非常低的。比如说像青霉素，它的严重过敏反应是5000，就是说打5000针中间肯定会出现一个严重的过敏反应。当然呢，现在这个新冠疫苗呢，都建议大家在打完以后呢，就是至少留在那个门诊观察15到30分钟。And the next, just want to clarify some misinformation, and because there are a lot of misinformation out there. And number one, whether the COVID-19 vaccine and cause COVID, and the answer is no, because again, Mmr vaccine, as mentioned per slides, and does not contain or use a live virus. There's no chance it can cause people the COVID. And does Mmr vaccine affect the DNA? The answer is no. MRNA vaccine does not go into the nucleus. That's where the human DNA is. And also, for Mmr vaccine and convert into the DNA and requires a reverse transcriptase, and the human cell doesn't have that. The vaccine does not include that either. And the third, and can test positive COVID-19? Answer is no. And again, this vaccine, once and injected going to the human cells, will be degraded very quickly. So it's not going to be test positive on our PCR based and the test, but maybe test positive on antibody based test to show the protection after vaccination. The next one, does COVID vaccination benefit people already infected or have been infected with the COVID The answer is yes, can offer additional protection. And actually, and most recent study shows, and people recover from the natural infection even after the first dose and already triggered a very strong and neutral immune response, very high titer of neutralizing antibody. So that raises question, maybe one dose for these people, one dose is sufficient. So basically, natural infection will be prime and booster will be the first dose of vaccination. The last one, and had mRNA technology been used for study of other vaccines? Answer is yes. And there are few infectious diseases, including Ebola and rabies, etc., has been used and use this Mmr vaccine to technology develop vaccine. And also, an mRNA technology right now being used to develop cancer vaccine as well. 这个就讲说呢，就是回答一些大家比较常见的这个误解吧。第一个就是这个疫苗是不是可以造成这个 COVID 的感染？这个答案肯定是不会的，因为这个疫苗它根本就没有包括这个存活的病毒，所以它绝对不会造成这个COVID infection。第二呢，它会不会影响人体的 DNA？答案也是不会的，因为这个疫苗的这个 mRNA 呢，信使 RNA 呢根本就不会进入到细胞核中间去，然后人体的 DNA 都是在细胞核中间的。第二呢，就是 mRNA 要变成这个 DNA 的话，它需要逆转录酶，人体没有这个酶，疫苗也没有这个酶。第三呢，就是这个打了疫苗以后是会不会做 COVID 检测会变成阳性？这个答案就是说，如果是 PCR 检测不会的。如果是抗体的检测可能会阳性，因为这个疫苗确实可以提供这个抗体，提供这个保护，通过这个产生抗体提供保护。另外一点呢，就是对于已经感染过新冠的这个疫苗是不是可以提供这个保护性？这个答案是可以提供，在这个感染的基础上再加强保护。最近呢有一个实验一个研究已经出来了，在这个前面已经感染过新冠的病人的身上打了1针疫苗以后，这在病人身上就已经产生了非常高浓度的这个中和性的抗体，所以这就是表明对这些病人呢，可能1针疫苗就够了，不需要2针。所以他的以前的自然的感染呢，就是 prime， 就是首先的第一次人体见到了病毒，第二次这个疫苗呢就变成 booster， 变成个加强剂。最后一点呢，就是这个 mRNA 这个技术是不是用于其他的疫苗的研发了？这个回答是的。现在有几种传染病，像埃博拉病毒呀、狂犬病啊，还有什么其他其他的这个病毒已经开始用这个 mRNA 的这个技术研发疫苗了。因为这个现在 mRNA 这个技术呢，在这个癌症的疫苗中间也是比较活跃的一个领域。So this slide summarizes, and I've focused on the Johnson & Johnson vaccine because this is something probably coming out pretty soon. This is another third vaccine. Right now, it has not been approved yet, but it's on the horizon. And Johnson & Johnson vaccine is not mRNA vaccine. It's based on adenovirus-based vaccine. And based on current study conducting 3 regions, the efficacy is 72% in US. And to 57% in South Africa. And also combine all 3 regions, 85% protection on a severe disease. And one good thing about this vaccine is only require 1 dose and also can be stored in the routine ordinary refrigerator. Doesn't need to be frozen. And those last 2 features are really significant from public health standpoint. And thinking about the vaccine moving into the developing country, for example. The next one, Novavax, and early results from the UK shows 90% efficacy and pretty good. But small study in South Africa shows 50% efficacy, indicating maybe limited response to the local strain. And also doesn't require frozen, can stable in the ordinary refrigerator. 这个 slide 就是提供了一些其他2个比较有希望的疫苗吧。首先这个是Johnson & Johnson 这个疫苗，它呢不是 mRNA base， 它是在用腺病毒载体的一种疫苗。然后呢，它现在出来的结果在全世界有3个地区做了临床实验，在美国呢，它这个保护力达到72%，然后 比较低的就是在南非呢达到57%，然后他们3个地区合在一起呢，对严重疾病的保护率达到85%。当然，这个疫苗它的这个有效性呢，可能比2个 mRNA 疫苗要稍微差一点，但是它的特点就是它只需要1针，它不需要2针。然后这个公司呢，他们现在在研究2针下去以后，在做另外临床试，就2针下去以后，看他们的这个有效性怎么样。同时，另外一点就是这个疫苗呢不需要冷冻，在这个普通的这个冷藏条件下就可以使用，它有3个月的使用寿命。所以后面这2点呢，从安全公共卫生角度来讲是非常有意义的，因为我们将来这个新冠疫苗肯定是要普及到世界其他国家去的，在发展中的国家，这样只需要1针，然后在不需要冷冻的储藏点是非常有便利条件，比较有便利方面的优越性的。第二个就是 Novavax， 这是另外一个疫苗了。这个是它的疫苗呢是蛋白基础的一种疫苗，跟前面2个疫苗都不一样。然后现在在英国的实验出来结果，安全性有效性达到将近90%，然后在南非的有效性呢却比较低，有可能是因为当地的这个流行株对这个疫苗的有效性做了一个折扣。然后它也需要2针，然后它的储藏条件呢也不需要冷冻。And the slides quickly summarize impact. I think a lot of discussion on the new variants and new strains impact on the vaccine. Right now, 3 strains are really focusing. Number 1 is B117. This is the first identified from UK. And the current data shows this strain actually can increase transmissibility. And also the preliminary data shows and this strain may be a little bit more lethal and more fatal compared to the previous strain. And the good news is the current vaccine we're talking about are really effective against this, protecting this strain. The second one is B1351. This is identified from South Africa, and also potentially increased transmissibility. Right now, already dominant strain in local area. And the concern about these strains, preliminary data shows, and the current vaccine may have a little bit reduced efficacy against this strain. And there has been the result from Moderna in the in vitro testing shows neutralized antibody level is significantly reduced, but still in the level offer protection, but somehow indicating and the vaccines less responsive to this strain. And the current Moderna is developing a booster vaccine candidate specifically targeting on this new strain. The last one is P1, is a new strain identified from Brazil in January. It's too early to see any impact on the vaccine yet. Of course, the concern is, and whether there's a new strain, the real public health concern is because B117, B1351 are being spread to other countries globally. The concern is whether these 2 strains can co-infect some subject and then generate a new strain, have the mutation combining both strains, and so can be both and more contagious and more fatal, and also less responsive to vaccine. I think that is a public health concern. 这个 slides 呢就想总结一下我们现在出现的这个病毒的变异株，它们对疫苗的影响。现在呢有3个主要这个变异株呢，大家比较关心。第一个就是 B117，这个是最早在英国发现的。然后现在的数据表明，这个变异的病毒呢，它有更强的传染力。然后现在在英国的初步数据表明，这个病毒可能怎么说呢？致病力也更强。然后呢，当然这好的消息就是这个病毒现在我们几个疫苗对这个病毒效果都是非常好的。那第二就是 B1351，这是在南非最先出现的。现在大家对这个病毒呢也可以变异呢也可以提高这个病毒的感染性。现在大家比较关心的就是这个病毒有可能对我们现有的疫苗呢，这个反应呢，就是有效性会打一个折扣。现在有一些初步的数据已经开始显示这一点了。第3个是那个P1，这是在巴西分离出来一个新的变种。现在因为今年1月份才刚刚发现，现在还不知道它对疫苗有什么影响，所以大家现在从这公共卫生角度来比较担心的就是B117上面的变异和 B1351的变异能够整合在一起变成一个新的毒株出来的话，这个就比较麻烦了。I think that's kind of goes to the last slide I have. I think right now we're in the race, right? And on one side, the virus is spreading and replicating for every single replication, and there's probability a mutation occurs, and over time a mutation accumulated, and sooner or later there will be a new strain and may resistant to the vaccines that we developed based on original strain. And on another side, we already have the vaccine turned to be very effective against original strain. And what we need to do is really speed up the vaccination and giving to people as many as we can as fast as possible, so we can stop the spread and stop the replication, stop and reduce the probability of the mutation and reduce the probability a new strain coming out can resist to the vaccine. And our 最后这个我就想说一下，就是我们现在属于一个这个竞跑的状态，一方面是在疫苗呢现在在这个非常快速，仍然非常快速的传播，然后在每一个感染者身上都有大量的病毒在不是每时每刻都在大量的复制，然后每一个病毒的复制过程中都有可能会产生个变异，所以随着时间的叠加呢，会迟早会出现新的这个毒株呢，会对我们现有这个疫苗，现有的疫苗是在最早原始毒上建立起来，会对现有的疫苗会产生就抵抗性。这是在这个病毒这方面，而在我们这方面呢，我们现在已经有这个疫苗，对这个原有的毒是非常有效的。我们现在需要做，从公卫生角度需要做的就是，大量的这个接种，然后呢，尽快大量的接种，这样的话呢，尽量阻止病毒的传播，这样呢可以降低病毒的复制，也降低这个出现这个对疫苗有抵抗力的这个新的毒株的出现的几率。I'll stop here and give back to Master Young and to other panel members. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Wang. And we are running short of time, so Hanbing, you want to unmute your microphone and turn on your camera?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm here.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay. Thanks, Cunlin. I'd like just to point out a few things I think are important. First of all, I'd like to reemphasize what Cunlin described earlier regarding the importance of taking the vaccine. As you recall, both Moderna and Pfizer vaccine significantly reduced symptomatic infection as well as reducing infection that leads into hospitalizations. So in the long run, taking vaccine in a more broadly based has a potential to push this COVID infection into a common cold, which most likely will not cause a lot of mortality. Point number two is a lot of people have a question regarding the vaccine's efficacy against asymptomatic infection. I'd like to actually reference the Moderna study. In fact, they collect the participants' nasopharyngeal swab at the day of the first dosing and also the day of the second dosing, which is about 4 weeks later. In fact, the placebo group at a second dosing 4 weeks after the first had about 39 asymptomatic infections, and in the Moderna vaccine group, at the second dose collection of the sample, there were only 15 asymptomatic infections. In fact, they actually collected the nasal swab regarding whether their participants had COVID infection. So if you do a simple math, it's largely about around a 60% decrease of asymptomatic infection, although this data needs to be further clarified in large population-based study in the future as we have more data coming on. I'd also like to share my experience regarding myself. I received 2 doses Moderna vaccine 3 weeks apart. My first dose went really well, so I only had arm pain for about 2 days. I was able to hike about 10 miles next day, so I didn't feel much of a significant side effect. Although my second vaccine produced about 2 days of side effects, including generalized weakness, muscle aches, almost like having a flu-like symptoms. Although I didn't have any fever or nasal pharyngeal or nasal congestion, cough, those kind of symptoms. And my symptoms completely went away after 2 days. And this is largely the same experience as my colleagues in a hospital experienced. Our clinic have about 20 staffs, roughly 16 to 17 staff received vaccine. There are about 3 or 4 female staff did not receive vaccine due to their own reasons. One was pregnant, another one was breastfeeding. The third one had a history of a severe allergy with anaphylaxis. The fourth staff in our office has history of a severe autoimmune disease, so she decided not to proceed with vaccine in an initial time. And across the Mendocino and also our hospital, as of a Friday, we have had about 20% of the population in Mendocino who have received a vaccination either from Moderna or Pfizer. This includes both first and second dosing. So there must be more than half still waiting for the second dosing. In our hospital, our hospital staff and providers' acceptance of vaccine is roughly the same as my clinic, roughly 70%. You know, my clinic is about 70% as well. So those 4 staff had individual reasons. So that's my personal experience and my clinic's experience, and also my patients. I have had about 20 to 30 patients. Most of my patients have cancer, so I have 20 to 30 patients who already completed 2 doses vaccine. The first dose, as I described my own experience, was nothing significant. Maybe 1 or 2 patients had some flu-like symptoms like I had after second dosing. Most of my patients are older and more frail because they have cancer, they're older. And across the study from Moderna and Pfizer, we know that elderly population, they tend to have less systemic side effects such as fever, body aches, and fatigue, those kind of symptoms. And younger patients tend to have more systemic symptoms, especially after second dose. That's the couple points I want to make, just briefly in Chinese. 我非常赞同这个存林刚才那个讲法，就是需要大面积的这个接种，这样才有可能把这个新冠病毒把它这个改造成一个就像普通的这个感冒的病毒。大家可以听到那个存林刚才讲的那个Moderna 和 Pfizer 这2个的疫苗对有症状的感染和降低住院率是有很大的起色。那如果我们的这个感染者都仅仅是有很轻微的症状，或者没有症状，或者没有什么致死率的话，那这个病毒就跟普通的这个就是那个感冒病毒就差不多了。所以这是我的一个预期，就是在未来的若干年，这个病毒应该不会从我们身边消失，但是我们可以把它就是由于这个疫苗的这个功能，能够把它降成这个比较容易对付的一种病毒，就像感冒病毒一样。那第2点呢，就是大家有一些我看到有一些 email 有疑问那对这个有症状和这个住院的病人有很大的这个帮助，这个疫苗来讲，那对这个没症状的传播者怎么这个数据怎么来解释呢？我们现在还没有足够的数据，但是从 Moderna 这个疫苗的那个首期的这个数据来看，其实他们是收集了他们的这个临床实验参加人群的这个鼻黏膜的这个病毒的情况，他们在打第1针和打第2针的时候都采集了他们的那个样本。其实在打第2针的时候呢，在这个安慰剂组呢，就是抓到了大概39例，大概一组大概是19000人18000人，那抓到了39例这个无症状感染者。但是在那个就是疫苗组呢，只抓到了15例。那你大概一看，基本上就是60%的这个有效性。那这个就是一个很小的数据，但是也基本能看到一些端倪。这个对无症状感染的这个保护，还是无症状感染的这个降低，还是肯定是有用的。但是到底是有多大的好处，我们现在还不能量化。那估计再过几个月，3个月到6个月，这个数据就会有。 那我自己的情况呢，我在上个月的时候打了这个 Moderna 的两针，第一针呢基本没什么问题，就是胳膊疼了2天，第2天我还能去爬山什么的。但第2针完了呢，这个全身症状比较明显啊，有疼痛啊，有一些这个身上比较酸软啊，就跟得了小型的一个流感差不多。但是我没有发烧，我也没有咳嗽，也没有流鼻涕，啊，我也是上班没有什么问题，因为大家都知道这个打第2针一般都会有问题，就像那个 Moderna 和 Pfizer 它的这个数据表明，一般是年纪轻一点的人，这个全身症状比较明显，尤其是第2针。那年纪稍微大一点的人呢，就没有什么太大问题。我的诊所大概有20个人，大概有16到17个人，16个人已经这个打了这个 Moderna 的疫苗。大部分人的这个效果和那个大部分人的这个副作用跟我是一样的，因为我们的年纪都差不太多，没有年纪特别大的人。其中有4个那个护士呢没有打，那都是有个人原因。有一个呢是正在怀孕，马上就要生孩子；有一个是在喂奶，另外一个呢是以前就有非常严重的过敏反应。包括还需要打那个肾上腺素啊那种过敏反应，他决定没有打这个疫苗。然后第4个呢是以前有很严重的自身免疫性疾病他也决定观望一下。我觉得这都是这个处在合理的这个范围之内。从这个整个Mendocino 这个县和我们医院的这个考虑呢，就从截止到上礼拜5，大概已经 Mendocino 大概已经有20%的人群已经接种了。到目前来讲，我们没有看到任何的严重的那个副作用。我礼拜5也问了一下那个卫生局，他们没有听说谁因为打这个疫苗跑去住院或者怎么样的，没有听到过严重过敏反应。就像这个存林讲的一样，那如果9万人全部接种的话，如果严重过敏反应可能就是1例到2例。那我现在就讲这么多吧，我看看那个 Helen 还有那个 Donna 如果在线看看他们要讲什么，然后我们最后可以再做一个讨论。
大家好阿弥陀佛，我是一和，我就是从我作为护士，作为一个疫苗接收者和作为一个护士注射疫苗的这个护理人员的角度来讲一下这个vaccine 这个疫苗的这个情况。我跟 Dr. Wang 差不多都是接收的是 Moderna 的vaccine。我是1月7号是打的第1针，然后是第2针是在2月4号。症状也差不多跟 Dr. Wang 讲的，第1针以后呢，就是只是膀子有点疼痛，然后有一些疲劳，轻微的疲劳。然后第2天，就是第2天有这些，第3天基本上就没有症状。打了第2针呢以后呢，就是症状稍微明显一些，比较膀子更加比前一次要痛一些，然后人也更加疲劳，然后也是就是一些轻微的流感症状，有一些很轻微的恶心，就是 nausea。到这是第2天，然后呢，第3天基本上就是膀子还疼痛，其他的症状基本上就消失了。So I'm going to talk about my personal experience from in terms of as a vaccine recipient and a vaccinator. I got my Moderna vaccine the first dose on January 7th and the second dose on the February 4th. So the symptoms are very similar as Dr. Wang had. After I got my first dose, I experienced some soreness in my arm and some fatigue the second day, and the third day, pretty much just some soreness in the arm. So after my second dose, the second day after my second dose, I had more the degree of the symptoms is more a little bit more than the first dose. I had more soreness in the arm and more fatigue. Just feel tired and a little bit queasy in the stomach. I took a nap in the afternoon. But the third day, only some arm soreness, so I'm pretty much back to normal. So some of my colleagues took the second day off after their second dose because they just don't feel like they can function as well. So I would recommend those who had some like flu symptoms and feel very tired to take a day off after they had their second dose. Like Dr. Chen said, try not to schedule anything important the next day after your second dose. I think that it is probably wise to do, and including like do not go to a job interview, something like really important, or operate heavy machines, something like that. I would not recommend. So, 我建议呢，就是如果你的症状呢比较明显，在打了第二针以后呢，如果你可以请假的话，那么就请假在家里休息一下。特别是像 Dr. Chen 在他的这个上次的那个讲话里面讲的啊，就是说如果你症状明显，那就请假在家里休息，尽量不要就是安排一些重要的活动吧，比如说一些工作的这个叫面试啊，或者是就是操作一些这些比较危险性大的仪器，这些机器。Next, I want to talk about as a vaccinator, my experience. I just started to vaccinate my patient last week, so I don't think I have a lot of experience on that, but I want to talk about the preparation and the process of providing the vaccine to my patient. So usually all the vaccinator will go through some kind of training, some courses to get them familiarized with the vaccine, and especially know how to educate and inform their patients about vaccine and their side effects and the measures to take if they experience that kind of side effects. 下面呢，我想讲一下作为这个注射疫苗的这个医务工作人员，所要就是我的个人的一些经验吧，就是关于准备，给疫苗前一些准备工作啊，还有就是给疫苗的这个叫什么？就是这种这个经过。所以一般来讲呢，注射疫苗的医务人员都是要经过一些培训，他们都要这些都是必须的 required， 就是这样子呢，他们就是能够懂得这个疫苗是大概的一些什么情况，怎样制作的，这样他们可以向他们的病人呢解释，也可以提供更好的这种education， 就是给他们更好的一些information 嘛，就是first usually before I give the vaccination, I would call my patient beforehand to do some screening according to the pre-vaccination checklist. Moderna provides there's a pre-vaccination checklist. So I go over with them over the phone to particularly check if they have any history of severe allergic reaction. Then on the day of vaccination, I would bring a copy of the patient packet and go over the detail with them on that patient packet. including explaining to them the possible severe allergic reactions, and also the some expected side effects from the vaccine, and what measures we'll take. 通常呢是，在我给病人注射之前呢，我都会做一个叫 screening， 就是问他们一些关于他们的这个过敏的历史，然后我在注射的那天呢，我也会给他们一些就是一些 handout， 就是病人的一些information 这些信息给他们，并且给他们解释一下他们会有哪一些这个比较严重会有可能的这种严重的症状，然后我们会采取什么措施。Usually, I would check the vitals, get a baseline vitals before I give them vaccine. I think this is optional, and it's just my personal practice. I carry with me with 2 EpiPens and a diphenhydramine injection in my vaccine bag, along with the vaccine. 一般呢，我去病人家呢，我都会先检查一下他们的血压、量血压，还有这个心跳，体温这些。我想这个并不是每个人都会这样做，只是我个人的这种 practice。然后我一般会带有2针肾上腺素的这个针剂，还有那个 diphenhydramine， 我不知道这个中文应该如何讲啊？这个 diphenhydramine 也是就是治疗这个过敏症状的这个针剂，就是以防万一吧。This is for in case, for emergency, so I can use that. Usually, I would stay with them and observe them for about 15 to 30 minutes before leave their house to make sure they're okay. According to the research, mostly the severe reaction occur within the 15 or 30 minutes. So
we are running out of time.
Oh, sorry.
Can you cut it short?
Okay. So far, my patients are doing fine. The patient I vaccinated so far from age 88 to 99. None of them has severe reactions and not even soreness in their arms. So as Cunlin mentioned, elderly basically mostly had less reaction than younger population. 我就讲这个我一般呢去病人家呢，我会带上这个针剂，然后我会一般跟他们就是说在观察他们15到30分钟。一般根据这个研究呢，严重的反应都是在15到30分钟之内。目前来讲，从我听说的我的 colleague 来讲，还没有听说过任何 severe allergic reaction the cases. From my colleague and my own experience, I have not heard about any severe allergic reactions among the employees, healthcare workers, where I practice, and also among the patients. So that's all from me.
Okay, thank you, Helen. Sorry, we cut it short.
It's okay.
We are
Thank you.
running out
Sorry.
of time. And Donna, do you want to let us know briefly what happened in CDDB?
Yeah, sure. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Yeah, I'm sorry about my video. My bandwidth, it's a little precarious right now, so I don't want to turn that on because it might disrupt my transmission.
Okay.
Yeah, so I guess everybody knows that I'm the nurse practitioner for the City of 10,000 Buddhas. And what we did over the last several weeks, I have been reaching out to public health to try to get them to either come out and do a clinic to vaccinate all of our elders and our caregivers and all the various other people who are at risk and also eligible at CTTB. And what ended up happening was Dr. Doohan, who had been the public health officer all last year, and she's somebody that we worked very closely with last year when this whole thing started, to get our facility into a safe mode, a safe shelter-in-place mode. So it was great that she came back and she got in touch with me and wanted to touch base and make sure that we had what we needed over there. So what she wanted was a comprehensive list of all the eligible people, and she gave criteria for those people, and that would be all of the elders over 75 and all the caregivers and all the food service staff and any school boys and girls school staff and DRBU staff who lived inside and couldn't go outside for vaccination due to our quarantine protocol at CTDB. So anyway, that added up to about 100 doses. So what ended up happening was I told them when I wanted to have the clinic, which was on the 28th and the 29th of January. And then one of the public health staff brought a big freezer, with a special freezer with dry ice in it, and brought all those doses in the vials over to my office at CTDB, our clinic office. And we had an instructional session at that time too, just to make sure we were all on the same page of how to prepare, because it was Pfizer what we got. So Pfizer's a little, as you might or may not know, is a lot more labor intensive than say some of the other vaccines. So it took some preparation to prepare and to handle the vaccine in a way that didn't jeopardize it. So basically it was pretty straightforward. We just had a big vaccine clinic. We did 2 days of nonstop vaccination, and we had a system where people came in pretty rapid succession, but people stayed outside in my foyer area, and I was able to keep an eye on them and monitor them for at least 15 minutes, if not longer. It didn't have any reactions, only had one person who was fairly young, one of the younger caregivers, was the only person who reported any significant side effect, and she had some nausea and vomiting, which subsided after several hours. But it all went pretty well. So I would say when we'll be having our second dose, I would imagine we're going to be having our second dose around the 19th, because that's when they will distribute that second dose of the 100 doses 3 weeks from the date that we gave the first dose. I'm anticipating that we may have some more side effects from those doses. So we'll have to just let everybody know that, they may experience more side effects. But at this point, we vaccinated all of our elders except for 2. And both of those, one is 99 and the other is also in the late 90s. Only had 2 of those elders, their family members, would not give consent to vaccinate them. And I think they were just afraid that the vaccine might be too overwhelming for them. But we have gotten quite a good cross section of people vaccinated at CTDB, and we're going to try. We have a sign-up sheet to try to get more people vaccinated. We have some who don't want to still, or hesitant, and then we have some who are ready now and waiting to get their vaccine. So it remains to be seen. There's a little bit of a distribution protocol that they're working with at the county, where they're having waves of vaccine, first dose Pfizer, then second dose Pfizer. They get the waves that come in of vaccine. They distribute that for either the first dose or the second dose. So we're kind of in between that. I tried to get some more vaccine for a first dose for people, but they wouldn't release that now. But I think when they get their next supply for a first dose for the Mendocino County, then at that point they'll release more to me. So right now I'm just anticipating the second dose on the having a same exact kind of clinic that we just had around the 19th, and then hopefully not too long after that to get another first dose clinic. And I'm hoping that at some point we'll get some of the Johnson & Johnson, because the Pfizer, and I haven't worked with the Moderna yet, but the Pfizer, that's pretty labor intensive, and it has to be managed in a certain way. And there's a special freezer for it, that even the little portable freezer that they brought to me, it was very, I had to use that vaccine in a very certain specified amount of time. Whereas the Johnson & Johnson, they'll be able to give me dispense that to me, and I'll be able to keep it in my own refrigerator inside the clinic for up to 3 months. So we'll get a lot more people vaccinated with that vaccine. I'm hoping, I'm anticipating that. So, and if anybody has any questions, I don't know if there's anything else in Yongsher that you wanted me to say, or did you have any other questions?
I think we need some translation.
Yeah, I will do a very quick, little bit of a reformatted translation. But first of all, I'd like to thank Donna's the effort of coordinating those vaccines for the people inside the CTTB. It was a tremendous effort, and it was achieved. 那 Donna 是我们的那个圣城的护士，她在这里也工作很多年了，很多人都认识她。她在过去的几个星期内跟卫生局的负责人在非常频繁的联系。正好是以前卫生局的负责人 Dr. Duhan 以前跟我们圣城联系都比较紧密的，尤其是在这个疫情的初期。Dr. Duhan 呢回到了我们这个地方然后呢给这个 Donna 最近打电话问我们圣城的情况，捕捉了一些信息。那当时 Donna 呢就收集了我们圣城的这些需要符合当前这个排序的这个人员的名单，包括75岁以上的老人还有他们的这个护理人员，还包括学校的，还有这个食堂的工作人员。那大概一共是97个人，大概我当时看的名单上。所以我们从卫生局上个月拿到了100剂的Pfizer 的疫苗。那在1月28号、1月29号的时候呢，当娜就在圣城的我们的诊所里边进行了2天的非常辛勤的这个疫苗的这个接种工作。这个接种呢整体是比较安全的，只是这个过程比较复杂，因为这个 Pfizer 的这个疫苗需要放在一个冰箱里边，卫生局特殊送来一个小的冰箱，里边装的干冰，所以非常复杂，但是还是很顺利完成了。打过的这100剂的人员里面，只有一个年轻的一个护理人员接种以后呢，产生了一些胃肠的副作用，包括恶心，还有一些轻微的呕吐，但是几个小时以后就自己这个痊愈了没有什么其他的这个问题。那大概在2月19号的时候呢，就会有第2针，到时候我们再看他们的这个反应情况怎么样。在总体的这些老人，70以岁的老人呢，当娜刚才讲，只有2位老人没有打，这2位老人我可能也认识，一位是大概是92岁高龄的，还有一个是99岁高龄，他们的家人呢害怕这个老人的身体有不良反应，所以呢没有签这个同意打疫苗的这个证书。当然，包括打完第1针以后呢，还有更多的人，当娜讲有一些人呢，也以前不想打，现在也觉得也可以打，所以当娜现在跟卫生局在联系，什么时候能拿到这个第2批的这个疫苗就是打第1针的疫苗。如果是能打1针的，像 Johnson & Johnson 这样1针的疫苗，而且包括它这个储存起来比较方便的话，那是更加好了，因为真是这个 Pfizer 这个疫苗这个储存和这个接种过程真的是非常非常困难那大概基本上就是这样了。
we are running over time already, so I think we have to stop here. If people have questions, you can send to me or put it in the chat box. And so 我们时间已经超过了，所以我想我们这个讨论必须在这边打住。如果你有什么问题的话，你可以寄给我，或者打在那个 chat box 里头，那我们在书面上回答那个问题。下面我简单的讲一下下周。I want to make announcement for next week. Next week we have Dr. Victor Chen. He's a Chinese doctor. He's going to talk about the practical advice for external conditions. I'm sure that's including COVID-19. 那下礼拜天同样这个时间是政委的中医师，他会和我们来谈谈这个外感病的实用常识。这个新冠病毒应该也是属于外感病之一，所以这个应该和这个新冠这个疫情还是有关系的。Okay? So we will use the same link as today's, and we'll also try to have a live stream, and we'll provide the link later. 那这个连结还是和今天的一样。另外，我们也打算用到 YouTube 上面去直播。那这个连结呢，以后再给大家。And another thing is that after that, the Reverend Hensher and Damaster Chi will share with us the Venom Master instruction on vaccines. 那接下来的就是施法师和持法师，他们两位会和我们分享这个上人对在这个疫苗方面的开示，然后时间上分别在这边。So that's pretty much it. It's almost 9 o'clock. Sorry about that. And we'll dedicate merit. 那我们就这边打出，然后我们做个简单的回向。To save time, let's use just chanting Chinese. 那我们今天就用中文来唱这个回向偈。愿以此功德庄严佛净土，常保四重恩，下济三途苦。若有见闻者，悉发菩提心，尽此一报身，同生极乐国。In respect to the Venerable Master. Thank everyone, the speakers and the audience. 感谢大家的参加，是我们这几个专题演讲的讨论的人员，还有诸位听众。OK， 阿弥陀佛。